Hello and welcome everyone. In this video I will give you a quick summary of the 3.24 league announcement with my usual minion specific focus in terms of player and skill changes. The new league introduces spirits that haunt enemies, which are area specific and can be found in most places. They change over time and can be manipulated by the player via the Lantern of Aramor, which can be accessed early on. You can switch around modifiers between different types of monsters, and you can even replace entire packs with different ones via Allflames. These items drop throughout Wraithlord and allow you to swap out dangerous monsters with harmless frogs or enemies that drop specific loot such as tattoos. The new monsters from Allflames can also be raised as specters, which could provide minion builds with new and interesting options, but that remains to be seen. In general, haunted monsters drop increased or special loot, so there's an incentive to put those modifiers on more common monsters, even though this increases the difficulty of the area. In addition to that, killing haunted monsters also increases the chance to encounter devoted monsters. These are not buffed, but instead grant additional benefits to the player, and can even lead to the Nameless Seer, an NPC that rewards you with one unique item per encounter. You will also encounter haunted monsters with unresolved anguish, whose corpses can be transported to the Necropolis by Undertaker Aramor. In the Necropolis, you can then either choose to itemize the corpses and sell them, or use them to craft powerful rares or league-specific uniques by combining them with other corpses. The league mechanic applies to maps as well, and can now, for the first time ever, be manipulated by league-specific notables on the Atlas passive tree. In addition to that, the tree has been reworked in general to account for the changes made to the mapping system in 3.24. This includes the removal of sextants and master missions, with most of the functionality having been moved to scarabs. This comes with a rework of existing scarabs and the addition of new types of scarabs as well. You can now also combine different versions of scarabs belonging to the same league mechanic to enhance it further. This goes hand in hand with buffs to many passives on the Atlas tree, including new keystones and notables, for example to target farm specific scarabs, or prevent less valuable scarabs from dropping altogether. Overall, this will reduce the amount of consumables needed for mapping, make league starts smoother, and will lead to fewer invested league mechanics than are needed for an efficient currency strategy. In addition to that, you now have access to multiple copies of the Atlas tree, which can be locked in before activating a map, leading to a much more varied and less constrained endgame in 3.24. If that wasn't enough, there are also 5 new tier 17 maps with a range of powerful modifiers that can't be changed, and these maps are much more challenging than your average tier 16 maps, but nowhere near as crazy as some of the Valdo maps that were introduced last league. They have a 0.5% chance to drop instead of regular maps per Voidstone equipped, so progressing through the endgame as quickly as possible is now more important than ever. They also feature Uber monsters and a new set of bosses, which drop fragments of the invitations to Uber bosses. This replaces the keystones on the Atlas tree and effectively splits the invitations to Uber and non-Uber pinnacle bosses, allowing players to fight the non-Uber versions without wasting invitations to the Uber fights. These tier 17 map bosses also exclusively drop a couple of unique items that were reworked in 3.24, with the Wraithlord being the most notable one for minion builds. It now has 4 abyssal sockets, plus 1 to 2 levels to all minion skill gems, and grant +1 to maximum number of specters per abyssal jewel socketed in the helmet. Since this effectively doubles the number of specters, pure specter builds will most certainly be an interesting option going forward. However, since this is a chase unique and specter builds are not the best early on, they won't be relevant on League Start. The campaign has been slightly altered to include League content as part of the progression. For example, the Dweller of the Deep is now an Essence monster, there's a Legion monolith in the climb, and many more that are yet to be discovered. In regards to minion skill gems, the most notable change is a nerf to SRS. It now no longer has the more damage with melee attacks modifier that scales with gem level. The other minion specific changes are sadly nowhere near enough to make those skill gems an interesting option in 3.24, in my opinion. For the Ascendancy changes, we're looking at a nerf to the Sentinel of Radiance's Burn Aura from the Guardian in terms of both damage and AoE. This doesn't change much about the power of the Ascendancy on League Start, or even later on, but instead forces the player to actually use some abilities while progressing through the campaign, which is fair. On the Necromancer, 3 notables have been changed either directly or indirectly. Unnatural Strength was changed indirectly because Unholy Might no longer grants 30% of physical damage as extra chaos damage. It instead now provides 100% of physical damage converted to chaos damage, and 25% chance to play Wither on hit. This allows poison minion builds to utilize United in Dream again, which reduces the dependency on Ghastly Eye Jewels with minions have chance to poison, but overall lowers the damage of all poison minion builds that don't have internal damage conversion like SRS. For non-SRS poison builds, you could alternatively just keep using Severed in Sleep for Envy and Wither, and allocate Plaguebringer for reduced damage taken and more damage dealt, at least in high budget builds with enough minion poison chance. For Chaos hit-based minion builds, this notable will no longer be relevant, since the Fist to Chaos conversion can be accessed from a 4 white socket Triad Grip, and switching from Severed in Sleep to United in Dream actually decreases the damage due to the critical strike multiplier the former provides. This allows the player to either utilize Plaguebringer for reduced damage taken and more damage dealt, or to allocate Bone Barrier for minion survivability and recovery on the player itself. Mindless Aggression has been buffed. Instead of granting increased minion damage, attack, cast, and movement speed, it now grants 20% more minion life, which was moved here from Bone Barrier, and 10% more minion damage. This is a powerful buff, especially for high investment minion builds, because they tend to have large amounts of increased minion damage and attack speed, so a more damage modifier is better at scaling overall DPS. And last but not least, there is Bone Barrier. Bone Barrier has been completely reworked. It no longer grants the Bone Armor Guard skill, which is probably due to the removal of the left-click cast and the introduction of automation support, which wouldn't have worked with Bone Armor because it's not a skill gem and thus can't be linked. It also no longer provides 2% increased recovery rate of life and energy shield per minion, or 20% more minion life. Instead, it now provides minions have 40% of life added as extra energy shield, and 1% of damage dealt by your minions is leached to you as life. The life as extra energy shield for your minions is much better than what Bone Armor used to provide, as long as you scale minion life to a decent degree, and the damage leached to you as life mod will boost player recovery far beyond what was possible before. Even without any investment into leech nodes, this recovers a fifth of your maximum life as long as your minions deal decent damage and have a target to attack. It can be scaled further by increasing total maximum recovery and or by allocating the 10% of leech is instant mastery. If I understand this correctly, it will allow you to recover up to 1% of life per minion attack as long as they deal enough damage, which leads to some high-end builds effectively becoming unkillable as long as they're not one-shot. For energy shield based builds, this is a bit more tricky because you first have to convert the life leech into energy shield leech via Ghost Reaver. This costs you additional passive points and disables energy shield recharge, which can be an issue in situations where you would like to use Val Discipline to stay topped off, like the bullet hell phase of Uber Shaper. Either way, it's probably sensible to spec into an energy leech notable to access the instant leech mastery, even for life-based builds due to the proximity on the passive tree, so most builds will either have to allocate Light Eater or Ethereal Feast for the mastery. I think that minion builds in general look better than ever, with the ceiling for some Spectre builds being even higher than last leak's crazy lightning-based Balmer and animate weapon builds if nothing else changes. And that's pretty much it for the video. If you have any questions or suggestions, you can leave them in the comments. I try to get to them as soon as I can. I will release my list of minion league starters and a league start strategy for the Atlas in a couple of days, so stay tuned. If you want to support my work or connect with me and my community, you can check out my socials including Twitch, Discord, and Patreon at my channel page on the description of this video. Hope you liked it. Until next time.